Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and Diablo 4. The big question today is this: when are we finally getting that big balance patch that's been looming over us for a while now? We've had hot fixes and small changes day after day after day, and then suddenly all of that stopped. And it's felt like a big balance patch with a lot of that put together into one patch seems to be coming, and it really seems like that's going to be this Tuesday, the 27th. As displayed on the launcher, both Monday and Tuesday will have live maintenances. Further, we have this really hopeful and exciting tweet from Adam Fletcher, the global community developer director for the game. The awaited patch that we're looking for is coming, quote, very soon, as of June 25th, which was Sunday. And also, we generally expect Tuesdays as the patch days based on the history of the game so far, and with a major maintenance occurring over 2 days ending on the Tuesday itself, well, it looks very likely. A neat aspect of these maintenances is that the game will actually be, more unstable than normal, but will still run, you'll still be able to play, you won't be locked out of the game, as also confirmed by Adam Fletcher. So nothing is confirmed, but they continuously skirt around the topic without direct confirmations, but heavily suggest it at this point. I don't know, do they do this as a way to protect themselves, like maybe if there's a delay or something? That patch is apparently 13 pages long, which is certainly a lot bigger than anything else we've seen for balance or changes for the game so far. But either way, a balance patch is coming and is pretty overdue at this point. Whether it's Tuesday or not, what are we expecting? As discussed in various forms by the dev team, buffs are coming. So far, they've been much more on the nerf side of things with the changes, and they have acknowledged that. I'd recommend the full fireside chat that they did, but the general gist is that buffing has, wider reaching consequences, often unintended, compared to, say, nerfing. So they've been a lot more careful in testing before letting those land, and I think that's fair enough. But with those buffs coming, what is it we're actually expecting? Which classes and why? I'll tell you what I want buffed. The stash. Give me 10 times the amount of slots and put it in game immediately. I have 6 bank characters just to make space, and honestly, it's really dumb. There's no good reason for that. But aside from that and my saltiness, let's talk about what we expect and hope for in this upcoming balance patch. The number one obvious and confirmed buff is the Nightmare Dungeons and their value. As they've made it crystal clear, they want us to run Nightmare Dungeons as the endgame and not really like regular dungeons for better time to XP, as they repeatedly nerfed that to prevent that. The problem so far with that is they've done a pretty poor job of incentivizing them properly, ruining everything else to push it into something that's just okay, doesn't feel great. And some of the benefits of Nightmare Dungeons weren't even explained to us in-game. Like, did you know that Nightmare Dungeons have a much higher rate for sacred and ancestral drops? We learned that one via Twitter, again as a random reveal by the associate game director. These things really should be listed and told to you in game, maybe like when you're looking at world tiers referencing the dungeons, I don't know. But in any case, the Nightmare Dungeons need to have more value than other content if they want to encourage players to engage with them. They've confirmed that they're increasing the XP for these generally, which is a good first step, but I'd also like to see other changes like greater elite density, maybe make the legendary or unique drops better the higher tier dungeons you do to actually encourage that beyond just glyph XP, which just isn't good enough. We also know we're going to eventually get a teleport to active Nightmare Dungeons, which will be a nice quality of life, but I'm not sure if that'll come in this patch. What we do know is Nightmare Dungeons are getting buffs and improvements, and I'm very interested to see what the scope of that is, and I really hope it's more than just, hey, they give you more XP. But what about the classes? It's fair to say that all classes could do with some buffs. What I mean by that is the incredibly underused abilities, skills, passives every class has. There's a couple meta builds per class, some with more options than others, due to the raw power and relevance of the aspects and abilities and skills tied to that build. Compared to that, there's very clear variance in power of abilities overall. Take the Blood Necromancer as a good example, one that I played around with. I wanted to make the Blood Wave Ultimate work. They even buffed it in the one patch we've seen so far for that. The reality is every Necromancer build is probably and really should be using the Bone Storm Ultimate because it provides damage over time, damage reduction, massive crit chance increases while active. You can use aspects to give it a massive shield or make it last longer, even alter the type of damage it does for the Shadow Blight build. All of that in one ultimate. Meanwhile, the Blood Wave deals low damage and there's a knockback, and we can get an aspect to make it fire off multiple times, but the multiples deal much less damage. So Obviously, the Bone Storm is a better ability. There's a lot more going on for it. This applies to all classes and so many abilities that aren't used because they're so weak by comparison. I mean, look at Barbarians as a top tier example. All of their builds are using the same 3 shouts because they're simply so good, nothing else can be taken. The Sorcerers are much the same, with using the same abilities with a tiny variety in their 1 or 2 abilities based on the build changes. And the way the current balance is, it ultimately just leads to certain few meta setups and their slight changes. What a waste it is to have so many interesting abilities, passive playstyles and so on that are underused or not played at all because they're so underpowered. This is where we expect some relevant buffs in this patch, and that's going to shift up the meta, which is going to be very interesting. What about class mechanic changes? Is there any hope for that? Well, we don't know. They've not really confirmed that, but it's something that, say, Sorcerers are praying for. As the most popular class in Diablo 4 according to Blizzard themselves, it's rated the weakest class overall in the true endgame. To be clear, all classes do great in the endgame, but compared to one another, Sorcerer is having some clear problems. A major aspect is their extreme squishiness, and this could in fact be very much tied to element resistances that aren't working correctly as stated by Blizzard themselves. They're not providing enough impact to your survivability, and perhaps in the very design of Sorcerers, they're meant to rely on element resists, but they're not working properly. They get a ton of it from their main stat, intelligence, and their general defensives being element related, but it just doesn't play much of a role currently. According to Blizzard, they're hoping to get those reworked and much more impactful in Season 2. Not Season 1, Season 2. And that's not happening anytime soon, basically. But there's other aspects of issues here, like the class demanding so much commitment to be able to run anything tied to mana, which feels kind of lame for the concept of a sorcerer casting spells. One of the main meta options has you jump in and fight at melee, which is just funny. Or what about the enchantments, the class's main passive? You have this variety of options to create like different combinations, conceptually, but the reality is that, say, the Firebolt enchantment has so much impact that it's sort of illusion of choice. By setting enemies on fire, there's many perks that you can work into that concept that end up forcing sorcerers to lean into that because it's so impactful. Without some kind of improvement to the other options, that issue is just going to continue. I've heard and seen a good amount of calls for give us a 3rd enchantment slot as an alternative solution to buffing the other enchantments, but that might go a bit too far in potential. On the other hand, in terms of class mechanic changes, Necromancer. It's a funny one because I'm a Necromancer main, right? And I think the class is very strong. And I honestly think Necromancer is one of the strongest classes right now based on its current meta builds. But I also think it's one of the worst, if not the worst, classes conceptually. Our current Necromancers are sacrificing all their minions to actually be strong, which is hilarious. A Necromancer who revives the dead to use them for their purposes. In all the pre-release content, the cinematics and so on, the Necromancer is, summoning the dead. But in Diablo 4, it's only a niche-specific build that has real issues and weaker output, survivability problems, compared to the actual meta builds that is using minions. I think, mechanically, it's the fact that summons take up too many ability slots. I can understand 1 ability slot, right? But 2 is too much when we only have 6 slots, and that's barely enough for normal builds. On the other hand, the sacrifices provide so much benefit. Like major vulnerability options, extreme crit damage increases, crit chance, shadow damage improvements, and so on, while having minions does not provide comparable benefits in any way. Now, I'm no dev or balance team working and testing these concepts out. Whatever I'm suggesting is not really going to be a straightforward fix. I know that, and I'm not claiming that I have the answers. I think it's a complicated thing, and so I'm hopeful that they've tried some things and found a solution beyond just making like minions deal more damage or something. And yes, the blight, shadow, corpse explosion of Necromancer, the VFX of that is super obnoxious, and we would love to see that change where, it doesn't stack the VFX so you can see nothing inside of it. A very simple concept, but maybe hard to implement. But on the other hand, it's a joke that Necromancer is so painfully slow to play. I'm honestly offended when I swap between my Rogue and Necromancer that my Rogue is just walking at double the speed passively to begin with. Why are Necromancers so slow? Every class except Necromancer has incredible mobility options. But Necromancer, Nah, man, we just walking around like a slug. We'll catch up eventually. So, yeah, I really hope they give Necromancers some sort of way to move around faster, something at all. But that baby rage aside, those are some of the things that I'm hoping for, as well as the very few confirmed things we have currently. We're really hoping that it happens this Tuesday, because obviously we all want to test this out and get into a new meta well before Season 1 actually hits and changes and resets everything anyway. Time will tell, but let us know in the comments what you're hoping for. Maybe when it comes to the game as a whole, or maybe just specifically your class. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.